82-year-old Rose Thompson sat bleeding beside Highway 380, clutching her 13-year-old terrier mix Buddy against her chest as both of them showed clear signs of the brutal beating they had endured before being dumped on the isolated East Texas road. The retired school librarian had been attacked by her own grandson and his girlfriend, who had stolen her life savings and left her to die with the only family member who had tried to protect her, her loyal companion, who now whimpered softly from his own injuries. "It's okay, Buddy," Rose whispered through swollen lips, her voice barely audible as she tried to comfort the small dog, whose left leg hung at an unnatural angle. "Someone will find us. Someone good will find us." Now that's when salvation arrived in the form of 14 motorcycles. The Roadside Angels MC were returning from a charity ride for animal shelters when club president Jake "Steel" Morrison spotted what looked like an abandoned bundle beside the highway. These leather-clad protectors were about to discover that sometimes the most important rescues involve saving not just one life, but two souls who had protected each other through unthinkable cruelty. The media would later focus on the criminal charges against the family members, but they would largely ignore the story of 14 bikers who became the family that two abuse victims had never had. Would you like to join us for this incredible journey? Subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss what happens next. The Roadside Angels Motorcycle Club had been riding the highways of Texas for over 13 years, their membership consisting of military veterans, retired law enforcement officers, emergency medical technicians, and animal welfare advocates who had found brotherhood and purpose through their shared commitment to protecting the most vulnerable members of society. What had started as weekend rides among former soldiers had evolved into the most respected emergency response organization in East Texas. Jake "Steel" Morrison, the 51-year-old former Army Ranger who led the Roadside Angels, was concluding their monthly charity ride to raise funds for local animal shelters when his combat-trained instincts detected something that made every protective alarm in his system activate. The small figure beside Highway 380 looked wrong, too still to be debris, positioned in a way that suggested human presence and accompanied by what appeared to be an injured animal. "All units, possible emergency situation," Steel commanded through his helmet radio to the 13 riders behind him. "Potential civilian casualties on highway shoulder appears to be elderly woman with animal companion, both showing signs of distress." The response was immediate and coordinated. 14 motorcycles began positioning themselves for emergency response, their riders combined training in military medicine, law enforcement, and animal welfare, automatically engaging protocols for complex rescue situations involving both human and animal victims. Sergeant Major Rick "Doc" Patterson, a former Green Beret medic who served as the Angels' medical coordinator, was first to confirm the severity of what they were witnessing through his military-grade optics. "Steel, we have an elderly female with visible injuries and a small dog, both showing signs of recent trauma," he radioed with the urgency that came from 2 decades of emergency medicine. "This looks like assault and abandonment." Through his binoculars, Doc could see Rose Thompson holding Buddy protectively, while both of them displayed obvious signs of violence, bruising, cuts, and positioning that suggested they had been beaten before being dumped at this isolated location. The combination of human and animal victims created a complex emergency that would require specialized response. "Jesus Christ," whispered Captain Sarah Phoenix Martinez, a former Air Force veterinary technician whose dual training in human emergency response and animal medical care allowed her to recognize the full scope of what they were facing. "That woman's been beaten, and the dog has obvious injuries too. Who does this to an elderly person and their pet?" Steel felt his ranger training engage as he processed the tactical assessment combined with the humanitarian crisis they had discovered. An elderly woman and injured animal abandoned on a desert highway represented exactly the kind of predatory behavior that required immediate military-style emergency response and long-term protective intervention. "All units, dual-species medical emergency protocol," Steel ordered, his Army training automatically shifting him into command mode. "Doc, human medical assessment and stabilization. Phoenix, animal medical evaluation. Everyone else, scene security and evidence preservation." If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. The 14 Roadside Angels members who responded to Rose and Buddy's crisis represented some of the most specialized emergency response training available in civilian settings. former military medics with combat experience, veterinary technicians with emergency animal care expertise, and law enforcement officers with domestic violence investigation skills, all united by their commitment to protecting innocent life regardless of species. Doc Patterson dismounted his Harley and approached Rose with the careful precision that 24 years of military medicine had taught him. What he found was worse than their initial assessment had suggested. This wasn't an accident or random crime, but clear evidence of systematic abuse that had escalated to life-threatening violence. "Ma'am, I'm a medic," Doc said gently as he began his emergency evaluation, using the calm voice that had comforted wounded soldiers and traumatized civilians throughout his career. "You're safe now. We're here to help you and your little friend." Rose's eyes fluttered open, revealing confusion, pain, and a kind of desperate relief that came from someone who had given up hope of surviving their ordeal. "Buddy, is Buddy okay?" she whispered, her first concern being for the small dog despite her own serious injuries. "We're going to take care of both of you," Doc assured her as he began emergency medical stabilization. "You're both going to be fine." Phoenix Martinez approached Buddy with the specialized training that combined veterinary medicine with emergency animal rescue expertise. Her assessment revealed injuries that clearly indicated deliberate violence rather than accidental trauma. "Steele, the dog has been deliberately injured," Phoenix reported through encrypted communications as she began emergency veterinary care. "Fractured leg, multiple contusions, possible internal injuries. Someone beat this animal as part of attacking the elderly woman." The medical assessment revealed the full horror of what Rose and Buddy had endured together. Both showed signs of systematic beating. Rose had facial bruising, possible broken ribs, and defensive wounds on her arms that indicated she had tried to protect herself and her dog. Buddy had been kicked and struck with something heavy, but had remained with Rose despite his own injuries. "This is domestic violence that escalated to attempted murder," Doc reported, as he established IV fluids for Rose's severe dehydration. "The pattern of injuries suggests prolonged abuse, followed by a final assault that was intended to be fatal." Staff Sergeant Tony Scout Rodriguez, a former Army intelligence specialist whose investigative skills made him invaluable for complex operations, had been conducting a systematic examination of the scene while the medical emergencies were being managed. What he discovered confirmed everyone's worst fears about the nature of Rose and Buddy's situation. "Steele, this was definitely family violence," Scout reported through tactical communications. "I found Rose's purse dumped over there. Credit cards and ID intact, but cash and prescription medications missing. This wasn't random crime. This was family members robbing and abandoning an elderly relative. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep?" The criminal investigation would reveal that Rose had been attacked by her 25-year-old grandson, Tommy Thompson, and his girlfriend, Lisa Martinez, who had been systematically stealing from Rose for months before the final assault that was intended to eliminate the only witness to their crimes. Captain Mike Hawk Williams, a former police detective whose 27 years of law enforcement experience included extensive domestic violence investigation, recognized the patterns that indicated this was part of an ongoing criminal enterprise rather than a single incident of violence. The systematic nature of this abuse, the theft of medications along with cash, the deliberate abandonment in an isolated location, this fits the profile of family members who have been exploiting an elderly relative and decided to eliminate her when she became a threat to their activities, Hawk observed, as he documented evidence for the criminal investigation that would inevitably follow. The coordination between medical emergency response and criminal investigation demonstrated the Angels' unique combination of humanitarian service and law enforcement expertise. They were simultaneously saving lives and preserving evidence that would be crucial for prosecuting the perpetrators. Corporal James "Medic" Davis, a former Navy corpsman whose emergency medical training supported Doc's human care while Phoenix worked on Buddy, had been maintaining communication with emergency services to coordinate the complex evacuation that would be required for both victims. Human ambulance ETA 12 minutes, veterinary emergency transport ETA 15 minutes, Medic reported, as the sounds of approaching sirens became audible. Both trauma teams are prepared for the specific injuries and conditions we've reported. The dual-species emergency response represented something unprecedented in Texas emergency services, coordinated rescue of human and animal victims that required specialized equipment, personnel, and facilities for both species. Dr. Patricia Chen, the emergency physician who received Rose at East Texas Medical Center, was shocked by the extent of abuse that both victims had endured. "I've treated domestic violence cases for 20 years, and I've never seen systematic cruelty this severe, directed at both an elderly person and their pet," she reported to the Angels, who had brought Rose and Buddy for treatment. "Will they both survive?" Steele asked, his military training making him understand that survival was only the first step in the recovery process that both victims would require. "Rose's injuries are serious but treatable," Dr. Chen replied honestly. "The psychological trauma may be more challenging to address. Animals often help elderly abuse victims maintain hope and purpose, so Buddy's recovery will be crucial for Rose's emotional healing." If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, the emergency veterinarian who treated Buddy at the adjacent animal hospital, was equally disturbed by the evidence of deliberate animal abuse that accompanied the human violence. "This dog was beaten as part of terrorizing an elderly woman," he explained to Phoenix during Buddy's initial surgery. "The injuries show that someone used violence against the pet to increase the human victim's psychological trauma." The veterinary assessment revealed that Buddy's injuries, while serious, were treatable with proper care. More importantly, his emotional bond with Rose had remained strong despite the trauma they had shared, suggesting that their relationship could be part of the healing process for both victims. The criminal investigation that began immediately after Rose and Buddy's medical stabilization revealed a pattern of elder abuse and financial exploitation that had been ongoing for over 6 months. Detective Lieutenant Maria Gonzalez of the County Sheriff's Department coordinated with the Angels to gather evidence and intelligence about the family members who had committed these crimes. "The evidence you preserved and the witness testimony you obtained were crucial for building a case against the perpetrators," Detective Gonzalez explained to Steele during a briefing at the hospital where Rose was receiving treatment. "Without your intervention, both victims would have died, and the criminals would never have been held accountable." The investigation revealed that Tommy Thompson and Lisa Martinez had been living in Rose's house while systematically stealing her Social Security payments, prescription medications, and personal property. When Rose had threatened to report them to authorities, they had beaten her and Buddy before abandoning them on the highway to die. These criminals were stealing approximately $2,000 per month from Rose's Social Security and pension payments, explained FBI Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, whose unit specialized in financial crimes against elderly victims. They had also forged documents to access her bank accounts and were planning to claim ownership of her house after her death. The federal charges that followed included elder abuse, financial exploitation, animal cruelty, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The evidence collected by the Angels had been crucial for establishing the systematic nature of the crimes and the premeditated attempt to eliminate witnesses. Rose's recovery would require months of medical treatment and psychological counseling, but the Angels' presence throughout her hospital stay provided the security and support that traditional victim services often couldn't offer. Different members visited daily to ensure her safety, while providing the companionship that isolated elderly patients needed. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? Buddy's recovery required multiple surgeries and extensive rehabilitation, but Phoenix's veterinary training and the Angels' commitment to animal welfare ensured that he received the specialized care needed for complete healing. More importantly, the Angels arranged for Rose and Buddy to remain together throughout their recovery process. "Why are you helping us?" Rose asked Steele during one of their conversations in the hospital room, her voice still weak from her injuries, but gaining strength as her physical condition improved. "We're just strangers who got in trouble." "Ma'am, protecting our community includes protecting you and Buddy," Steele replied, with the quiet dignity that military service had taught him. "You're both part of our family now." The promise was sincere and would prove to be life-changing for Rose, Buddy, and the Angels, creating a relationship that would transform the final chapter of an elderly woman's life while teaching a group of warriors about the deepest meaning of protection that extended across species lines. Staff Sergeant Danny Ranger Martinez had established a protective rotation at the hospital to ensure that Rose and Buddy were never left alone during their vulnerable recovery period. The presence of Angels members served both as security against potential retaliation and as emotional support for trauma victims who had lost all trust in family relationships. "Rose lights up when the Angels visit," observed hospital social worker Rebecca Rodriguez. "She's gone from being withdrawn and fearful to being engaged with her recovery process. Buddy's presence and the Angels' protection have provided therapeutic benefits that traditional counseling couldn't achieve alone." The transformation was visible to every member of Rose's medical team. Nurses reported that she was more cooperative with treatment, more willing to eat, and more optimistic about her future when she knew the Angels and Buddy were nearby. Her blood pressure and heart rate improved measurably during their visits. As Rose's hospital stay extended into her second week, the depth of her isolation before the attack became apparent to the Angels who spent time with her. She had no family visitors except the criminals who had attacked her, no friends checking on her progress, and no social connections that extended beyond her relationship with Buddy. "Rose has been alone since her husband died 5 years ago," Steele reported to the other Angels during one of their planning meetings. Her grandson and his girlfriend were the only family she had contact with, and they were systematically abusing and robbing her. Without Buddy, she would have had no one who cared about her welfare. The realization that Rose's vulnerability had been created by family exploitation rather than just age or infirmity influenced the Angels' understanding of their protective mission. They began to recognize that preventing elder abuse required addressing family dynamics and social isolation rather than just responding to crisis situations. 6 months after being found beaten and abandoned on Highway 380, Rose Thompson and Buddy had transformed from terrified abuse victims into the beloved heart of an extended family that included 14 of the most protective and loving people either of them had ever encountered. The Roadside Angels had not only saved their lives, they had given them a family that valued their companionship while ensuring their safety, dignity, and joy in their remaining years together. Steele Morrison sat in Rose's newly renovated living room, reviewing the latest home security reports, while the sound of motorcycles arriving for their weekly family gathering echoed from the driveway. The small house had been completely transformed with accessibility modifications, state-of-the-art security systems, and the kind of protective infrastructure that ensured Rose and Buddy would never again be vulnerable to the predators who had nearly killed them. "The medical alert system is working perfectly for both of you," Steele reported to Rose as he studied the latest monitoring data. 24-hour coverage, direct connection to emergency services for both human and veterinary emergencies, and immediate notification to 6 different Angels if anything unusual happens. Rose smiled as she watched Angel members setting up tables for their weekly dinner, while Buddy hobbled excitedly between the visitors on his healing leg, clearly recognizing the people who had become his extended pack family. "I still can't believe how much our lives have changed since you found us on that road." The relationship between Rose, Buddy, and the Angels had evolved far beyond the dramatic rescue that had brought them together. The elderly woman and her loyal companion had become the emotional center of the organization's family structure, providing the kind of unconditional love and civilian wisdom that helped veterans process their transition from military to peacetime life. "Tell me about the Elder Pet Protection Program," Rose requested, noting the detailed legislative proposals spread across Steele's briefcase related to the advocacy initiative that had been established in her and Buddy's honor. "We're now working to pass state laws that recognize animal companionship as essential for elderly well-being and require that elder abuse investigations include assessment of pets who may also be victims," Steele explained enthusiastically. "Your case has shown lawmakers that criminals often abuse elderly people's pets as a way to increase psychological control and terror. The Rose and Buddy Protection Act represented something unprecedented in elder abuse legislation. Legal recognition that many elderly people's mental and physical health depended on their relationships with companion animals, and that effective elder protection required addressing the welfare of both human and animal family members. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. Dr. Patricia Chen, the geriatrician who had treated Rose since her rescue, was amazed by the improvement in her physical and psychological condition that had resulted from her integration into the Angels family, along with Buddy's continued companionship. "Rose's recovery has exceeded every medical prediction we made," she reported during a presentation to the Texas Geriatrics and Veterinary Medicine Joint Conference. Her transformation demonstrates the powerful impact that both human social support and animal companionship can have on elderly trauma recovery. The secret to Rose's remarkable healing wasn't just the medical care she had received. It was the angel's understanding that elderly trauma victims needed protection, companionship, purpose, and the knowledge that their beloved animal family members would also be safe and cared for. Chen's research had documented measurable improvements in Rose's cognitive function, physical strength, cardiovascular health, and psychological well-being that correlated directly with her integration into the angel's family structure and Buddy's successful recovery from his injuries. Rose's case challenges conventional assumptions about aging, trauma recovery, and the role of animals in human healing, Dr. Chen explained to medical colleagues studying geriatric trauma care. When elderly patients have strong social support and their animal companions are also protected and healthy, their healing capacity exceeds what medical science predicts based on age and injury severity alone. Doc Patterson had become Rose's personal medical coordinator, using his Special Forces medical training to monitor her health, while also coordinating with Phoenix Martinez to ensure that Buddy's ongoing veterinary care was integrated with Rose's medical treatment plan. Rose and Buddy are a medical unit. You can't treat one without considering the other, Doc explained to medical students who came to study their integrated care approach. When we monitor Rose's blood pressure, we also check how Buddy's mobility affects her daily activities. When we assess Buddy's pain levels, we evaluate how his discomfort impacts Rose's emotional state. The integrated human-animal medical approach had become a model that was being studied by geriatric care facilities and veterinary hospitals throughout Texas. The success of treating Rose and Buddy as a family unit rather than separate patients had influenced medical practices that served elderly people with companion animals. Phoenix Martinez had developed specialized expertise in treating animals who had been abused, alongside elderly human victims, creating veterinary protocols that addressed both physical injuries and psychological trauma in animals who had witnessed and experienced violence. Buddy's healing required understanding that he had been traumatized not just by his own injuries, but by witnessing Rose being hurt and being unable to protect her, Phoenix explained to veterinary students studying animal psychology. His recovery needed to address both his physical wounds and his psychological need to understand that his protective role was valued and that Rose was now safe. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? Buddy's transformation from a terrified, injured animal to a confident, affectionate companion demonstrated the resilience that animals could show when given proper medical care and emotional security. His bond with Rose had actually strengthened through their shared trauma and recovery, creating a partnership that enhanced both of their well-being. The weekly medical assessments that Doc and Phoenix conducted in Rose's home had become opportunities for the elderly woman and her dog to demonstrate their continued progress while also serving as social visits that provided emotional support and family connection. Rose's role in the Angels community had expanded beyond being a beloved family member to becoming their advisor on civilian elder care, animal welfare, and the kind of wisdom that comes from surviving family betrayal and finding healing through chosen family relationships. Rose understands things about trust, forgiveness, and rebuilding your life after betrayal that most of us never have to learn, observed Hawk Williams during one of their regular planning meetings. She's taught us that protecting people means more than just rescuing them from immediate danger. It means helping them build relationships where they feel safe, valued, and loved. Rose's insights had influenced major decisions about Angel community service programs, victim advocacy initiatives, legislative priorities, and the organization's approach to helping other elderly people who had been betrayed by family members. Captain Sarah Phoenix Martinez had applied her Air Force veterinary training to developing a comprehensive animal welfare component for all Angels elder protection programs. Her experience with Buddy's recovery had taught her that many elderly abuse victims maintained emotional stability through their relationships with pets, who were often also targeted for violence. When we protect elderly people, we have to protect their animal family members too, Phoenix explained during a presentation to the National Association of Chiefs of Police. Abusers often threaten or harm pets as a way to control elderly victims. Effective protection requires addressing both human and animal welfare. Phoenix's approach had led to the development of specialized emergency shelters that could accommodate elderly abuse victims along with their companion animals, ensuring that protective services didn't force elderly people to choose between their safety and their beloved pets. The emergency shelter program had served over 100 elderly victims and their animals during its first year of operation, with documented success rates that exceeded traditional elder protection services that didn't accommodate animal companions. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. Staff Sergeant Tony Scout Rodriguez had channeled his Army intelligence expertise into investigating the broader criminal network that had exploited Rose, working closely with law enforcement agencies to identify and apprehend other family members and associates who had been involved in systematic elder abuse and financial exploitation. Rose's case was part of a larger criminal enterprise that targeted multiple elderly victims, Scout explained to FBI investigators during the Joint Task Force briefing. Her grandson and his girlfriend were part of a network that specialized in identifying isolated elderly people, gaining their trust, and then systematically robbing and abusing them. The investigation had revealed a sophisticated criminal operation that targeted elderly victims based on Social Security payment schedules, family isolation factors, and companion animal relationships that could be used to increase psychological control over victims. Scout's intelligence analysis had identified patterns in the criminals' behavior that allowed law enforcement to predict their activities and prevent additional attacks on elderly victims. His military training in threat assessment and pattern recognition had proven invaluable for understanding how the criminals selected and approached their targets. The criminal network had been responsible for victimizing at least 12 elderly people over 3 years, with Rose and Buddy being the only survivors, until the Angels' intervention disrupted their operations. The systematic nature of their crimes and their escalating violence levels suggested they were progressing towards serial killing of elderly victims. Rose's survival and her willingness to testify had been crucial for dismantling the criminal network and ensuring that all gang members received sentences that reflected the severity of their crimes against vulnerable elderly victims and their animal companions. Rose's courage in facing her attackers in court helped us get convictions that included animal cruelty charges alongside elder abuse, reported District Attorney Jennifer Walsh during the sentencing hearing. Her testimony was detailed, credible, and powerful enough to convince the jury that these criminals represented a clear and ongoing threat to elderly people and their pets throughout the region. The convictions had resulted in prison sentences ranging from 20 to 30 years for the gang members, with Rose's grandson Tommy Thompson receiving the maximum sentence under Texas laws for crimes against elderly victims and animal cruelty. The sentences ensured that the criminals would not be able to target other elderly people or their pets for decades. Master Sergeant Carlos Tank Rodriguez had established a home modification program that provided security upgrades and accessibility improvements for elderly people living with companion animals, ensuring that both human and animal family members could live safely and comfortably in their own homes. Many elderly people resist accepting protective services because they're afraid their pets won't be welcome or properly cared for, Tank explained to community organizations interested in replicating their elder protection model. Our program addresses both human and animal needs simultaneously, making it easier for elderly people to accept help. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? The home modification program included installation of pet-friendly security systems, accessibility improvements that accommodated both elderly humans and aging animals, emergency communication devices that could alert both human and veterinary services, and environmental modifications that supported the health and safety of elderly people and their companion animals. Tank's integrated approach had served over 300 elderly residents and their pets during the program's first 18 months, with documented improvements in both human and animal welfare that exceeded the results achieved by programs that addressed only human needs. Corporal James Medic Davis had established a mobile integrated health service that provided coordinated medical care for elderly people and their companion animals, using specially equipped vehicles that could deliver both human and veterinary services to elderly residents who had difficulty accessing traditional health care. Many elderly people avoid medical care because they can't leave their pets alone, or they're worried about what will happen to their animals if they're hospitalized, Medic explained to medical and veterinary students studying integrated care delivery. Our mobile service addresses both human and animal health needs during the same visit. The Mobile Integrated Health Service operated from converted recreational vehicles equipped with both human and veterinary medical equipment, examination facilities, and communication systems that connected to hospital and veterinary networks for consultation and referral services. Rose had been one of the service's first clients and had become a volunteer who helped other elderly residents feel comfortable accessing coordinated care that addressed both their own health needs and their pets' medical requirements. Rose shows other elderly people that we're professional healthcare providers who understand that pets are family members, Medic observed during one of his progress reports. Her endorsement has been crucial for gaining trust from elderly patients who were initially skeptical of medical care that seemed too good to be true. The Mobile Integrated Health Service had provided coordinated care to over 800 elderly residents and their companion animals during its first year, with documented improvements in both human and animal health outcomes compared to traditional separate care delivery systems. Staff Sergeant Danny Ranger Martinez had developed a comprehensive elder pet emergency response program that ensured elderly residents and their animal companions could be evacuated together during natural disasters, medical emergencies, or dangerous situations that required immediate relocation. Traditional emergency response often forces elderly people to choose between their own safety and their pet's welfare, Ranger explained during emergency management training conferences. Our program ensures that elderly people and their animal family members can be protected together, which improves cooperation with emergency services and reduces trauma for both species. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. The emergency response program included specialized transport vehicles that could accommodate elderly people and their pets simultaneously, temporary shelter facilities that welcomed both humans and animals, and coordination protocols that ensured both human and veterinary medical care would be available during emergency situations. Rose and Buddy had participated in emergency response training exercises, demonstrating how elderly people and their pets could be efficiently evacuated and cared for during crisis situations. Their example had been crucial for developing realistic protocols that addressed practical challenges of integrated emergency response. The annual Rose and Buddy Day celebration had become one of the largest community events in East Texas, bringing together thousands of people whose lives had been touched by their story or the Angels' broader community protection services. The event commemorated not just their rescue from Highway 380, but the ongoing work that had grown from that life-saving intervention. 6 months ago, criminals left Buddy and me to die on a lonely highway, Rose addressed the enormous crowd during the anniversary celebration, with Buddy sitting alertly beside her wheelchair, wearing a small vest that identified him as a therapy animal. Today, the family that saved our lives has created protection and community for thousands of elderly people and their beloved animal companions throughout Texas. The celebration included success story presentations from elderly residents who had been protected from various threats while keeping their pets safe, families who had benefited from the integrated care programs, and community members who had become volunteers in various protective services that addressed both human and animal welfare. 79-year-old Margaret Chen took the microphone to share her experience. 3 weeks ago, criminals tried to break into my house to rob me and threatened to hurt my cat Whiskers if I called police. The protection program that grew out of Rose and Buddy's rescue meant that I had immediate help from people who understood that protecting me meant protecting Whiskers too. Margaret's successful protection from attempted burglary, along with her cat's safety, embodied everything that Rose, Buddy, and the Angels were working to achieve through their community-based elder and animal protection programs. The community that had formed around Rose and Buddy's rescue represented something unprecedented in social services, a sustainable collaboration between elderly residents, their companion animals, military veterans, law enforcement agencies, and community organizations that had created measurable improvements in safety, health, and quality of life for vulnerable populations across species lines. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? Local veterinary clinic owner Dr. Patricia Rodriguez spoke about the practical impact of their integrated protection efforts during the anniversary celebration. Before Rose and Buddy's programs, we regularly treated animals who had been injured during crimes against their elderly owners, she testified. We haven't had a single case of elder-related animal abuse in 6 months because criminals know that elderly people and their pets in this community are protected together. The economic and social revitalization of their rural community demonstrated the connection between safety and the well-being of both human and animal residents. Property values had increased because elderly residents felt secure aging in place with their pets. New pet-friendly senior services had opened, and crime rates had dropped dramatically as protection programs created environments where predators couldn't operate effectively against either elderly people or their animal companions. 1 year after being found bleeding beside Highway 380, Rose Thompson and Buddy had been appointed as honorary advisors to the Texas Commission on Elder Safety and Animal Welfare, where their programs and philosophy were being implemented throughout the state. The retired librarian and her loyal terrier, who had once been left for dead, were now influencing government policies that protected both elderly people and their companion animals. The commission appointments represented official recognition of their expertise and the effectiveness of the integrated approach to elder and animal protection that had grown from their rescue. But for Rose and Buddy personally, the positions represented an opportunity to ensure that other elderly people and their pets would never have to experience the terror and abandonment they had endured. Rose and Buddy's survival and recovery have demonstrated that elderly trauma victims and their animal companions can not only heal from violent crimes, but can become powerful advocates for protecting other vulnerable elderly people and pets, commented Dr. Robert Williams, the Commission's chair. Their programs show how military veterans, elderly civilians, and animal welfare advocates can work together to create communities where aging Americans and their beloved pets can maintain dignity, independence, and security together. Rose's first recommendation to the Commission was the establishment of state funding for community-based elder pet protection programs that combined veteran volunteer services with professional social services and veterinary care. Her proposal was based on documented results from the Angels programs rather than theoretical approaches to elder or animal care. The Commission's unanimous approval of Rose's recommendations led to the creation of the Texas Elder Pet Protection Initiative, a state-funded program that provided grants for veteran organizations to develop integrated protection services for elderly residents and their companion animals. The initiative was the first of its kind in the United States. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. 2 years after 14 motorcycles had stopped to investigate what looked like an abandoned bundle beside Highway 380, the ripple effects of Rose and Buddy's rescue continued to spread throughout the Southwest and beyond. The Angels model of integrated elder pet protection had been implemented in over 40 cities, creating a network of programs that had helped thousands of elderly people and their animal companions avoid becoming victims while maintaining their independence together. The expansion had been carefully managed to ensure that both human and animal welfare standards weren't compromised by rapid growth. New chapters were required to complete extensive training programs in both elder care and animal welfare, demonstrate commitment to integrated protection services, and maintain the professional standards that had made the Angels effective partners for both social service agencies and veterinary organizations. The Angels had grown to over 200 active members across 6 states, with chapters providing emergency response, community protection, educational support, and integrated family assistance services for elderly people and their pets. Their annual budget, funded entirely through donations and volunteer labor, exceeded that of many government elder services agencies while achieving better outcomes for both human and animal clients. Rose's influence extended beyond direct service delivery to fundamental changes in how communities understood the relationship between elderly vulnerability, animal welfare, and veteran purpose. Her programs demonstrated that sustainable protection required addressing both individual safety and companion animal welfare, both personal security and cross-species family well-being. Rose and Buddy taught us that every elderly person saved from victimization and every pet saved from abuse has the potential to save others. Steele reflected during his transition ceremony as he prepared to hand leadership to the next generation. The woman and dog we found dying on that highway have saved thousands of others through the programs their recovery inspired. The ceremony brought together over 5,000 people whose lives had been touched by either Rose and Buddy's direct intervention or the broader network of protection that had grown from their rescue. The event included testimonials from elderly adults who had avoided becoming victims while keeping their pets safe, veterans who had found purpose through integrated service, and community members who had discovered the power of cross-species protection and family relationships. Rose, now 83 years old, and serving as the Angels Director of Elder Pet Relations, had been chosen to deliver the keynote address at Steele's retirement ceremony, with Buddy sitting beside her as her co-spokesperson. Their transformation from dying victims to community leaders represented the kind of growth that effective protection could inspire across species lines. "Steele and the Angels saved our lives on Highway 380, Rose said during the ceremony, while Buddy wagged his tail in recognition of the assembled crowd. But they did more than save us from dying. They gave us reasons to live, family to love, and work that matters. Now it's our responsibility to make sure we continue saving lives and building family for anyone who needs protection and belonging, whether they have 2 legs or 4. If you're watching this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? 5 years after their rescue, Dr. Rose Thompson and therapy dog Buddy, they had been awarded honorary recognition from Texas A&M University's colleges of both social work and veterinary medicine, were serving as consultants for the National Elder Pet Safety Administration, helping develop protocols for protecting elderly people and their companion animals from various forms of abuse and neglect throughout the United States. The lesson we learned that day wasn't just that good people exist when you need help, Rose told audiences at the National Conference on Elder Safety and Animal Welfare, with Buddy demonstrating therapy techniques beside the podium. The lesson was that everyone has the capacity to become someone else's lifeline, someone else's family, someone else's reason to believe that protection and love are real for both humans and animals. Rose's presentation at the National Conference included statistical analysis of 5 years of Angels programs, over 8,000 elderly residents and their pets protected from various forms of victimization, 6,000 veterans engaged in meaningful integrated community service, 12,000 families supported through crisis situations involving both human and animal welfare, and measurable improvements in community safety across dozens of neighborhoods. But Rose's presentation focused less on statistics than on stories, individual transformations that demonstrated the human and animal impact of sustained intergenerational protection efforts that addressed cross-species family relationships. She told the story of Margaret Chen and Whiskers, who had become community safety educators after being protected from burglary. She shared the journey of Dorothy Martinez and her dog Rex, who had become animal therapy advocates after escaping elder abuse. "These aren't just success stories," Rose explained to the national audience, while Buddy provided comfort to audience members who became emotional during her presentation. "These are demonstration projects showing what becomes possible when communities choose to invest in protection rather than punishment, in relationship building rather than isolation, and in recognizing that families come in many forms, including beloved animal companions." The national attention had led to requests for technical assistance from organizations throughout the world, countries where aging populations were facing similar challenges with crime, fraud, and social isolation affecting both elderly residents and their companion animals. The Angels Training Manual had been translated into 12 languages and adapted for different cultural contexts, but the core principles remained consistent. Authentic, long-term commitment to both human and animal welfare, integration of emergency response with community development, leadership development that created sustainability beyond individual personalities, and understanding that protection required both professional skills and family-level relationships that honored cross-species. Barnes. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. The highway where Rose and Buddy had been found bleeding and dying had been renamed the Angel Wings Highway, in honor of the angels who had saved their lives and the protection network that had grown from that rescue. A memorial marker at the site told the story of how 14 veterans had stopped to help an elderly woman and her injured dog, and created a movement that transformed thousands of lives across species lines. 10 years after being found dying beside Highway 380, Rose Thompson and Buddy continued to serve as elder pet advocates while living rich, protected lives surrounded by the chosen family that had saved them and whom they had transformed through their love and wisdom. The Angels had trained community protection teams in over 25 states, had contributed to the prevention of thousands of crimes against elderly victims and their pets, and had influenced fundamental changes in how law enforcement and social services approached integrated elder animal protection. The mainstream media had eventually discovered Rose and Buddy's story, but only after it had already inspired a movement that transformed how communities approached the intersection of aging populations, animal welfare, veteran service, and public safety. The coverage had helped spread their model to other regions and organizations, but media recognition was secondary to the practical reality of lives saved and families strengthened across species lines. The Angels prove that sometimes the most important miracles happen when good people stop to help someone who needs protection, even when that someone has 4 legs as well as 2, observed television journalist Maria Rodriguez during a documentary about Rose and Buddy's rescue. These veterans didn't just save one elderly woman and her dog, they created a model for community protection that has prevented thousands of crimes and saved countless lives of both humans and animals. But for Rose, Buddy, and the Angels, their success was measured not in media coverage, but in the thousands of elderly residents who were living safely and independently with their beloved animal companions because someone cared enough to protect them all, the veterans who had found purpose through integrated service, and the communities that had learned to value vulnerability, strength, and love in all their forms. The biker club that had stopped everything to save one dying woman and her injured dog had created a legacy that continued to protect innocent lives throughout North America. Rose and Buddy's story demonstrated that angels sometimes wear leather, ride motorcycles, and prove that the most important rescues often happen when people choose to investigate something that doesn't look right and discover that families come in many forms, all deserving of protection and love.